Ohayo gozaimasu. Watashi wa Firu desu. Dozo yoroshiku. Yokozo PJT Forging to Samurai Challenge. And that is probably about all the Japanese I remember from a 1-year study at BTEC level. But yes, it is the Samurai Challenge, and if you've no idea what I'm talking about, these challenge videos are held by Dennis Tyrell of Tyrell Knife Works biannually, and basically he gets together a bunch of YouTubers, blacksmiths, bladesmiths, and we have to create some kind of weapon. And this year, it's samurai themed. And I'm hoping I might have a slight advantage over the others, because I studied martial arts, and in particular traditional jiu-jitsu, which was the art of the samurai. And part of my syllabus was learning weaponry. So even though it's been a very long time since I practiced, I can still remember a little bit about how to use a katana and a wakizashi, as well as other things like nunchaku or sai and one or two other little bits and pieces on the side. But I have been itching to get involved in this challenge since even before the chopper challenge, so let's just dive straight in. Except we can't. Because in my last video, I converted a little van into a micro stealth camper, and this workshop has been absolutely trashed as a result. So the first thing I need to do is give this thing a quick spritz. And now we can get started. And it is hot as balls today. So, yeah, this is going to be fun.
Shut up and sit down.
Oh yeah, by the way, I don't know why, but my camera is kind of crapping out and it does this kind of flickering thing. Shut up, car! My camera does this kind of like flickering thing now, and it's really annoying, and I don't know how to get rid of it. So I'm really sorry about that, but there's not a lot I can do until I get a new camera, I guess. But anyway, let's talk about what I'm actually going to be making. So here's my thinking. When you think of samurai weaponry, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Katana, right? Everyone thinks of a katana or samurai sword. It's iconic, it's got this mythical / legendary reputation about it. And I'm up against a bunch of extremely talented bladesmiths who are probably going to be making a lot of samurai swords. And if not an actual katana, they'll probably be working their way down to maybe like a wakizashi or a tanto. And realistically, as is becoming my catchphrase in this series, I'm a blacksmith, not a bladesmith. So I don't have a hope in hell of competing against these guys when it comes to making like a decent sword or similar.
Also, I think I've proven that middle-aged white British guys wielding a samurai sword it never looks cool. Although it could be worse. Could be an American.
So what do I go with? Well, I've been away on the internet and I found this.
Some sausage. Daddy, would you like some sausages? Daddy, would you like some sausage? Sausages.
And then I carried on searching and I've decided I'm going to make a Sodegarami. Now, what the hell is a Sodegarami, you might be wondering? Well, it's only the most evil-looking weapon you've ever seen in your life. Seriously, just look at this thing. Does it not just scream evil? That is one of the most cruel pieces of weaponry I think I've ever seen designed. And it turns out these were used by the equivalent of samurai police, basically, as man-catchers. So the tines you see on the top weren't actually really designed to stick into flesh, although I guess they could do. They were designed to ensnare and tangle somebody's clothing so that you could better control them. The long pole was in order to keep you out of range of a potential attack from a samurai sword, being carried by most samurai. And the spikes on the pole were there so that whoever was being detained couldn't just grab onto it and wrench it out of the person's hand who was using it. And I know, somebody's going to say, that's not a sword, or that's not a dagger, or that's not a knife, and this is a knife maker's challenge. Well, I checked it with Dennis Tyrell, and he's down for it, so the rest of you can go spit. I want to see something cool, and I want to make something that very few people have made before on YouTube. So, with that, should probably grab a piece of steel and start forging, I guess. here's where we've got this thing up to so far. I had to do a little bit of forging back and forth on this just so I could get the angle grinder in as deep as I could to get these cuts going through as far as I can. But yeah, it's now time to start the actual forging on this thing. So step one is going to be trying to round off each of these individual shapes, because obviously it's a bit all over the place and higgledy-piggledy. So I'm probably going to have to bend all of them back and then do one at a time just so I can actually have something to clasp onto. And because if I have them all stuck out like a Christmas tree, I'm not going to be able to fit it through the door of my forge. So, yeah, let's do that. Hang on a sec. I've got a press. Check out the boob sweat! Well, this thing came out pretty dang nice. Is it perfect? No. You can see like this tine here got a little bit small, and that was due to the angle grinding not being a completely straight line. Some of the tines down by the base, you can see a few of the twists in the steel. But for my level of skill, and bearing in mind that this is made out of one solid piece of steel, I'm thrilled at how that thing came out. Look how cool it looks! So I need to get this thing cleaned up because it's still covered in all the forge scale and gross stuff. So I'll either wire wheel it or I'll take it to my sandblaster, which has been playing up a bit recently, so not sure yet. You'll find out in the next clip. And just like that, we've got this thing all sandblasted up and looking nice. Next is what this thing is going to be connecting to. Now, I wanted to use some traditional red oak for this handle, but buying red oak timber is really hard to get hold of in the UK. But then I remembered, you can buy bow staffs, and this one is made of Japanese red oak, as I'm sure it probably says somewhere here in amongst all the warnings. But obviously you saw me forging up the socket on this thing, so I need to grind that down and get it to fit on there. So, let's do that. Let's give this a go. Like I haven't already test fit this for the camera. Woohoo! Yeah! Alright, so the next step for this thing is we need to worry about the spiky bits. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this flat bar stock and I'm going to cut it to 50 centimeters. And then for the actual spikes themselves, I think I'm going to make them out of brass. The idea is once this bit is forged to shape and welded onto here, I want to blacken all of the steel so that it contrasts nicely with the red wood underneath and then the golden spikes of the brass. I think that'll look really nice. So I need to cut this piece of steel to 50 centimeters. I need to forge a very slight curve in it just so it hugs to this piece of wood. And then, yeah, it's going to be a case of making up probably 30 brass spikes. Let's get to it. Alright, well with the 3 of these made up, it's now time to move on to the spikes. Now, off camera, I did a little bit of prototyping, and these were some of the ideas I had. I had a fully rounded one, I had a little stubby spiky one, and then I tried octagonalizing one just to see how they look. And of these 3, I really liked the round one, and annoyingly, these were also the most tricky to make. It's not so much getting the shape that was awkward, it was keeping the shape whilst then riveting it on the back. Because you need something hard to hammer on this, it was just dulling the points, and I was having to take it back over and sharpen up again, so there wasn't much point in starting it. But because it was then attached to this, trying to maneuver this thing in order to get it perfectly round was a pain. But I figured out a pretty successful way in which to do this, and off camera again, I've completed the first one, which I think has come out looking pretty dang cool. So I'll show you the process for how I've made this, and I'll make up 2 more. So, let's do it! So the first thing I did was I took a piece of brass over to the belt grinder, and using a little bit of clamped down steel, you can see that I'm using it as a guide in order to make the bevels pretty concentric all the way around. It's not as accurate as using a lathe, but it's a lot less time consuming and there's very little difference in the finished product. Once done, I took it over to the angle grinder and chopped the end off, leaving just enough sticking out past the bevel. This was so that I could clamp it into my mill, and then the next thing I do is pretty darn stupid. Using the angle grinder again and the mill at the same time, I'm grinding down the diameter of the brass piece. This is to allow me to put it through the drilled holes, allowing me to rivet it. If there's one thing I recommend you don't do, it's this. Spinning machinery is like the worst thing in the world, and 2 pieces of spinning machinery is just... It's dumb, but I didn't have much choice. But yeah, don't do this. And then yeah, I had to make up this little jig which allowed me to put the spikes in without damaging them too much. This allowed me to rivet it on using a peening hammer. Unfortunately, the peening hammer I had was a bit too large, so I had to swap between a big one and a little one. But overall, the finished piece came out pretty nicely. And with that, it's time to cue the montage. Alrighty, with these things all sandblasted up and looking pretty, it's time to move on to the welding. And this is going to be an interesting time. I know I didn't get much footage of the welding, but look at this thing. Right, let's attach this. Hang on, let me shut that welder up. Oh, it looks so cool. Now I've just got to hope it fits the wooden stake still, but yeah, I am thrilled at how that thing looks. And here it is with just a test fit. Oh man, this thing looks mean. Right, I need to drill some holes, rivet this thing on, and then glue up the socket and attach it all together. And then I need to start worrying about finishing. So, let's do that. So I realised after I filmed that last talky bit that I'd made a mistake. Originally, I was planning on making 4 of these spiky bars, and then I was going to rivet it through to the other side. However, I made 3, as with 4 it just looked a bit kind of too much effort. But as a result, I had nothing to rivet it to on the other side, because I didn't want to rivet going through into the wood, because that would definitely, well, there was a good chance it would just rip out. So instead, I've decided I'm going to be screwing this thing in. On each of these, I put 2 holes, but in slightly different locations, just so there's not 3 screws all going through the same place, if you see what I mean. And hopefully that will avoid any sort of stress concentrations during use. And whilst it might not be the most aesthetically pleasing thing, I mean, this build is not a traditional build, you've probably figured that out. But with this thing all turned black, and by using some of these black screws, I think it will still look okay. But yeah, now I've got to take this thing back off the stick, and I'm going to start working on the cold bluing. So let's do that. Alrighty, this thing is all acetoned up. Now it's time to get on with the cold bluing. And I'm excited to see how this thing looks. I've covered all of the spikes, because I don't want them turning black. And hopefully it should just be the steel that turns, but let's find out. Right, that's the cold bluing done. Now we just need to go over it with the darkening Danish oil, and that will help prevent against rust and make this thing look really nice and black and glossy, which should hopefully contrast well with the brass spikes. So let's do that. And there we go, there's the Danish oil all done. Now we've just got to wait something like 24 hours or so for this to fully dry, and then we can start worrying about the fit up and polishing the brass. So whilst I'm waiting for that Danish oil to dry, I thought I would try and do my touch mark, but in Japanese? Now I'll be the first to admit, my katakana is very rusty, and as for kanji, I haven't got a clue. But having done a Google Translate, I'm pretty sure this says PJ forging, I think. And yeah, I'm going to use a Dremel and see if I can try and sort of engrave this in the wood, so wish me luck. Kanji's hard, man, look at that stuff. Okay, so what I can tell you is that was really hard. I know I wasn't able to film much of this again, but that's because I was using my camera stand to hold up the other end of the pole. But I think that actually came out okay. I'll wipe away the acetone and we'll have a proper look, but now I just hope that I translated this right, otherwise this will be awkward. Focus, you bastard. Well, that came out better than I expected it to. And that looks cool as hell. Look at it. I am really liking how this project's come out so far. Like, I think this might be up there with one of my favourites. But real quick, guys, I'm just going to throw this in there and I'm not going to harp on about it. This video is sponsored by these guys. They're providing prizes for the viewer entries, and it'd be really cool if you check them out. One of the main points of these challenges is to try and get some publicity out there for sort of smaller channels like mine. And these sponsors really help these challenges happen, so consider spending a bit of time just to check them out. Also, in other exciting news, Walter Sorrells is going to be a guest judge for this challenge, and from what I gather, he's going to be doing like a sort of review video on his channel, just sort of highlighting the things he likes or doesn't like about people's work. I don't know, that's down to him. But yeah, I said I'd keep this short and sweet, so let's get back to reassembling this thing. Okay, it's the next day, and the varnish has dried, so it's now time to connect this thing up to the pole. So I'm going to epoxy it on, and then I'm going to rivet through the socket and screw in the spiky bits. So let's do that. Are you fed up with me saying that? It's definitely become a bit of a catchphrase. Here we go, there's all the spikies screwed on. Last step I need to do is just chop this pin off, clean the spikes with acetone, and give them a polish. And then this thing is all done. But I'm going to leave it here for now and wait for the epoxy to fully set in this really peculiar jig, if you want to call it that. So change of plan again. First of all, I've riveted this pin on, and then I started polishing up the spikes, but then the more I look at it, the more I think I prefer it with the sort of more matte sandblasted finish. So, you know what? I think I'm going to call it here. So, let's get this thing out of the rest of the plastic wrap, and let's get some beauty shots.
Real quick, guys. This is a challenge video. So, if you like what I made, consider voting for mine. There'll be a link down below in either the comments or the description. Probably both.